morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this Thursday morning. As you start your day, welcome to Vox ISM's first Tech Talk featuring Manufacturing Mike and myself, Ksenia Belchikova, as the host. Our first topic is on backflushing. Mike, did you want to say hello?
Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. It's Mike Fontaine. I'm with Vox ISM. I've been working in manufacturing for over 20 years.
Excellent. So just to kind of start us off, I just want to quickly talk about backflushing. So no, it's not pumping water backwards through your pool filters. Um, it's definitely something that is used in manufacturing every day. And Mike's just going to take us through it and explain kind of in layman's terms and simplify what backflushing techniques are. So break it down for me. It does sound like plumbing techniques. What exactly is backflushing?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Backflushing is basically just a simply inappropriate, misleading word that's used to describe consuming or issuing materials to production orders at the point of when you use them. So that's kind of the rough idea. I thought that probably what I would do, I have my little notepad out here, and I was going to help sort of explain or doodle what's typically happens in a manufacturing environment, and then you just kind of interrupt me as we go along. So you can kind of imagine that here I have, I'm just going to draw it out. You can see this, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I have my inventory location, right? And you can also imagine that I have production line 1, production line 2, and maybe a production line 3. So what happens, we're going to just pretend that I like beer, so we're going to make a little beer bottle. So you can imagine that we're manufacturing beer. And what we need to do is we need to take our little forklift guy over here, little truck, and we're going to come over here to the inventory. And what I want to do is prepare the packaging and the materials to the front of each line. Okay. And then you can imagine as product comes off onto pallets, right? Little pallets over here, that I have a little barcode. And when I scan the barcode for the pallet, it's going to record that I made, I can't type that very well. I made maybe 150 with one scan, just boop, 150. And it goes back and it consumes 150 labels, 150 bottles, and 12 ounces of beer, the packaging, the wrapper, etc. So what this does, or this is sort of the concept behind it, is that real time I'm able to scan and record the consumption of the inventory as it's happening without having to go in and say, okay, well, I used, transaction number 1 was 150 for the bottle, and I have to do the math, 150 times 12 for the consumption of the liter of beer, and then 150 labels, 2 cartons, packaging, wrappers, etc. It takes a ton of time in order for an individual to write down on the computer what they've used. Mm-hmm. And so backflushing is just an easy way of saying, yeah, I used it. So what that does is it allows, if you think about it, the labels, they're like literally fractions of pennies, like thousandth of a penny. They have so many.
Right.
So is it really worth your time to go in and say, yeah, I used 150 labels. It's going to take you like 30 seconds to do it. And if I'm paying you like $15 an hour to do it, you just wasted like 50 cents to record, 3 cents of labels.
Right.
That's sort of the mathematical model behind it. Does that make sense?
It actually does make sense, but what happens when you're waiting to the end? How do you know what you actually have on hand?
So in this sort of scenario, the best practice is that when in my ERP system, I'm going to figure out that I need to do maybe a 3-day run of, I don't know, we'll call it like some sort of lager beer. And what's going to happen is that I'm going to tell my forklift guy to go over into the inventory location and do what's called a movement. So This area, this inventory area, is what we call a controlled area. So I believe 100% of the time what's sitting in the stores or the rack. And that's because I only have one chicken to choke. That's the forklift driver, right? He has the keys. You imagine there's cages. I know for a fact that the inventory is correct in this location. As soon as I take product and I move it onto the floor, it's uncontrolled. People can steal it. People can move it. People maybe don't record it.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind a large production run is that I might stage a day's worth of production from the inventory to a floor location. And so, and I haven't consumed it when it's on the floor location. I only consume it afterwards. So from a ERP perspective, you'll be able to see that maybe you have 1,000 of the product sitting here in inventory, and then daily, I need 250 in this location, and then hourly, as I start to scan, it's removing maybe whatever 5 pieces out of this location, out of the uncontrolled location. This means that as a purchasing person, I pretty much ignore what's happening on the floor. It's going to be consumed.
Mm-hmm.
It should be consumed. I picked it. It's destined for it. And if I have any variances, so let's say that I scanned whatever, maybe my bill of material was incorrect, or there was a rounding problem. At the end of the day, I'll be able to go into the system and look to see if this location has any negatives or any positives. So part of my forklift driver duty, right, is I come around at the end of the shift. They have to tear down machines anyway. I clean them up. So at the end of the day, I look to see if I have any product sitting. And if I do, then I move it back. And if I have anything, if I don't have anything physically on the floor, but I have inventory in my system, I know that something went wrong and I need to consume it. So you get then you'll do the transaction. So your job is to keep this location reconciled once a day.
Once a day. Okay.
Right? So this gives you sort of the ultimate in inventory control and accuracy, and overall reduces the amount of transactions that you need to do.
Okay. So what happens though if you have a really long production run?
A really long production run? Mm-hmm. Well, it was kind of describing that you want to report things in parts. Okay. Where if I had a 3-day run, 15-day run, I want to basically pick, I want to pick by day, or I would take that large production order, like 15 days, and I would break it down into bite-sized components.
Okay.
So how do I make a new page here?
Where's a big eraser?
Big, yeah, go here. Large eraser. Okay. Oh, it's like a whiteboard.
Oh, it's the worst.
I don't know if that's gonna work at all. Oh my goodness.
Okay, you almost got it. There we go.
Yeah. Wow, kind of cool. I've really done it like that. All right, so you can imagine that I have. So pretend I'm drawing here. This is a large run, 7-day run. And then I have another large run, and this is maybe, 3-day run. And this is Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, etc. All ERP systems, what they do is they'll say that at the beginning of my production run, I need all material.
Okay.
This is so if you think about it, the purchasing system will say, hey, bring in everything you need to complete this production run. But if you're able to work just in time, and obviously it depends on the components and the types of material. So in the case of process manufacturers, their supply chains are really close to them. That means that they can bring stuff in every day, right? It's just in an offsite storage, and then they can bring it in every day. And other materials, sure, they're going to come overseas and it take a long time. So obviously, depending on the type, I'm going to assume for right now we're dealing with a process manufacturer, that what you want to do is take this large production order and really break it up into chunks. So each work order represents 1 day's worth of manufacturing. It's kind of good in some ways because then you can see if you are going to maintain. If
Right.
you're going to be tracking, like if you don't produce what you're supposed to produce in a day, you're behind.
Right. Okay. That's
So
actually
that
really
makes
good
sense.
insight. Yeah.
And then now we have this little work order, right? That says, oh, I need some of the material on this day, and then I need more material on this day and more material. So it now starts to time phase the material requirements. So now you can choose. Here's the advantage with your purchasing system. You're probably going to buy everything. Well, that's kind of cool. That little color. You're going to buy everything, but how you choose to pick it and consume it, that is in the world of manufacturing. So purchasing, probably for the week, you're going to bring everything into that controlled area. And now I have a little work order that says, hey, go out and pick the stuff that you need for the day. And then on the back side, depends on the type. If you could, instead of scanning per line, like per pallet coming out, you can now simplify it and just say, yeah, how many did I do at the end of the shift? And then this whole thing, right, gets consumed. This whole thing gets consumed. And so once a day, not real time, that you're able to see what your inventory accuracy is.
Okay.
So if you didn't have this, for instance, if you didn't have a scanning technology, this is really good because it just means, what did you make? Oh, I made whatever 850 cases of product. Okay, now it consumes the inventory. And you don't have to, even if you didn't have a controlled area, like a controlled area is the best, but it requires 2 transactions. You can just say, here's my that's my production order. This is my inventory location, right? Someone still has to go and pick the inventory, but at the end of the day, your inventory is going to be correct.
Okay.
If that makes sense, by doing it in this way. That would be if you didn't have any scanning. I said before, I'll say it again, that the golden rule in inventory control is nothing moves without a transaction. That's the best, right?
Okay.
But everything, like information, is a cost, right? If you want to have more detail, it costs you more to do it. So you start thinking about whether or not it makes sense to put the effort in. Does it make sense to, to have this kind of visibility, moving things out and having ultimate control every day? That's great because it's easy to find things. You go into the computer and it says, hey, go find this product, and you'll know that you have 14 pieces sitting on this rack. Love it. If you do this kind of thing where you take stuff out, you don't record it, and you move it to the floor and it's partially in use, then when someone says, hey, where is this product? And you go, it says that you have it in your inventory system, but you don't consume it until the end of day, you're going to get confused, right?
That's right. No, that's exactly the concern, right?
That's the concern. So if you have, and I've been in situations where the president, making $150 an hour equivalent, is out searching for parts.
Ooh, no way.
Yeah. So so if you have people, the Walking Dead, wandering around your shop looking for parts, probably, if you do the math, it makes sense to have a better inventory control system. And you don't have to go to scanning. It's basically you have this concept of backflushing. Now, I wanted to talk about, let's go in ahead in my test system. like we were talking about, production. So you're making juice, you're making milk, you're making things that are very, very repetitive. So let's go in and we'll take a look at something that's a little more discreet. So everybody knows what a bicycle is.
Hopefully.
Hopefully everybody knows what a bicycle is. And so you can see here that if I need to make one bicycle, then I need a front wheel, a back wheel, a chain assembly, mud guards, mud flaps, lamps, whatever, bells, brakes, etc. So these are all of the components. So what you don't see in here, this is kind of the mystery, you don't see all the little itty bitty pieces, the nuts and the screws and the washers, etc.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Now I did that on purpose, and there's some philosophy behind it. Some not. So the for these little nuts and bolts and screws, they are insignificant, like to the cost of my inventory.
Okay.
So I will not keep track of them in my system because they aren't worth the time to count, and I will expense them. So this is like a nuance or an interesting concept. So anything, I think statistically, you're supposed to have somewhere between 10 and 15% of your inventory, overall inventory or parts, as expense. That means I don't care about them. I don't want to look at them. I don't want to count them. And you don't put them into your bill of material either.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But some people want to communicate the exact bill of material or instructions. Mostly those are engineers, not supply chain guys.
That sounds about right.
Some guys will put all the little bits and screws, etc., in. And it's not that it's bad. It just means that now you have to manage the inventory. Like I said before, managing costs money. So in this example, what I would do is that I might individually say I used a front wheel, used a back wheel, used a chain, etc., because these might be expensive items. If you think about it, a beer might cost you 5 cents to make, but a bicycle might actually cost you like $200 or $300 to make.
Right.
And so you want to keep control of these sorts of things, especially because some of them might require serial numbers. So a serial number means that, hey, you want to make sure that you've got the right serial number going into this final assembly, because if someone calls and complains, you're going to have to find out, like you have to do a recall. And so you can't use backflushing with those kinds of items, but you can do a mix. That's kind of what I wanted to make a point on. So it's not like black and white where we have to say we're all doing backflushing and it all happens at the end. You can actually mix and match. I call it like the ABCs of inventory control.
Okay.
A items are going to be your expensive items. They're going to be your serial controlled items. They're going to be quality related, where you want to know who took what part and used it in the manufacturing process. The B items, they're important. I want to count them on the shelf. Like I want to know how many I have because they contribute a fair bit of inventory, but that's about it. And then C items are like the screws, the nuts, and the washers. And I don't care about them because it costs me money, more money to count them and to manage them and to move them than it does to stock them.
That makes a lot of sense. So you can use a combination.
You can use a combination of these things, and they call it it's like 20% of your items hold 80% of the cost, and 80% of your items hold are the other way around, right? The 80% are the C level items. So in this way, you might say, okay, I'm going to manually consume and report that I use the wheel, the back wheel, and the chain assembly. And I want people to write down what those are because they're critical to the manufacturing process. Without a chain assembly or a wheel, you can't make a bike.
Right. Not going forward.
Right, and that might be because it's a long lead time item, or you can't substitute, like maybe the front, maybe you can change the front guard to the back guard. I don't know. But you would have these items as maybe the critical items, these items as, okay, the B items, sure, we're just going to backflush them out. We don't care because we can replace them fast, right? If we make a mistake in the inventory, or we have, I call it surprise shortages. It's a really cute word in manufacturing. Surprise shortage.
That's very sweet sounding.
how do you have a surprise shortage? Anyway, you can live with surprise shortages because you are making the decision to not manage them. But you have to choose which items are eligible for the surprise shortages.
Right.
And that would be the B and C. And if you think about it, you don't want to run around and count little boxes. Like, how many screws do I have in this box? Who cares? You have a box or you don't have a box. And if you needed to, some guy could run out to the hardware store and bring it back.
Right. Yes, I was going to actually ask you a question about using fractions, like exactly how you had just mentioned, like using, partial amount of what's inside the box, and how that would work.
Yeah, so the best thing is to, it comes back two things. One would be I would probably have the unit of measure at the lowest common denominator. So
Okay.
I would have it down. You could say that I have a box and I'm using 0.00001. And then when you start consuming or backflushing, you buy in a box and then you start consuming these fractions out of the box, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
So what you do in the system is that you can actually have different units of measure. So let's just pretend here, you can see the screen, right?
Yes.
So let's say that I want to buy in a box, and the box has 1,000 pieces in it.
Okay.
Right? So option number one is that you can say, oh, I need 2/1000ths of this part because the unit of measure is a box.
Okay.
And then you get into trouble, right? It's like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. How do I count 2/1000ths of a box? How many is that? Doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the better way is to set up these units of conversion so that you buy by the box, but then on your bill of material, you say, well, I actually need one, or I need 4. And then the system will automatically convert and start reporting whole numbers for you. So I buy a box and I put it in inventory and it translates into 1,000 pieces. And now my bill of material, it's pulling out manually or backflushing 4 pieces out of the 1,000 every time I make the bicycle. That's kind of how you work around fractions, if that makes any sense.
No, it definitely does make sense. And then what about, and I think you touched on this really briefly, but what if we have the same material and one is 8-inch, the other is 4-inch, and I run out of the 8-inch material and something changes on the BOM? What happens then?
Well, one of the nice things about the Microsoft system is that we have something, maybe, I don't know if it's here. It's probably back on the item itself. We have something called a substitution. So you can set up the system so that if you stock out of the one product, here, I'll just go in. Okay, so if I can click around here somewhere. Okay, here we go. So you see this area called substitutions?
Yes.
These are basically approved substitutions. So this would be, hey, if I run out of this one part, then maybe I can use something else. And therefore, the bill of material remains at whatever it's supposed to be. But on the work order, you have an option of doing this sort of substitution on the fly. Oh, I ran out of this, and I can do a substitution. Or you could just add in, say, okay, I used 2 of this, and then you can add another line item. So the main benefit of this system is that it maintains three levels of costing. I'll just go in. So our production orders are the documents that control what inventory that we need. And if I click onto this guy, there's something in here called, where are we? Yeah, here we go. So it has something called standard cost. That's from our standard bill of material. So if you I needed to manufacture something out of, I don't know, a 4-foot length, and I didn't have it. It's okay because I can change that 4-foot length to maybe an 8-foot length because it's a substitute, and it will keep the original bill of material the same, but all of the transactions are based on the as built work order. So you can plan to do it, and it'll compare the cost between what I was supposed to do to what I ended up doing, what I planned to do. Okay. You'll run into this like in aerospace. If you think about it, if you have to machine something out of like a 2-inch round bar. So just imagine I have, they call them yokes in aircrafts, but just imagine I have this tube of metal that I have to machine stuff down, and you run out of the 2-inch. You could use the 3-inch. It just means you're going to waste more material. So,
I see. Okay.
Right. So in here, you would plan on using the most appropriate, but you could substitute it for maybe a more expensive item, and the system will maintain it. And it'll still work with the backflushing as long as you do it before you do the transaction. So
now,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we kind of touched on the waste part. I actually wanted to ask about that as well. What about scrap? What do we do with scrap?
So scrap is 2 different ways of handling it. Probably the easiest way is that you embed it directly into, I don't know why that didn't have bill of material. You embed it into the bill of material itself. Let's go back. Add one. Back out. Back out. Too many screens open. So here, you see where there's a column called scrap percentage. So the easiest way is that you plan scrap into the manufacturing process. What that means is that it will tell people, like the buyers, to buy a little bit more because there's going to be waste in the manufacturing process. But what happens on the shop floor is that if you're backflushing, it's only going to be reporting what was planned. So that means when it comes to scrap reporting, you probably want to have people fill out, hey, I made a boo-boo, I made a mistake, and it's an exception. And I tell people, make it painful because their job is to produce quality parts.
Okay.
Quality parts with quality information. That's sort of the best practice way of doing it. So that means that I made a bicycle. Oops. I smushed the bicycle with whatever press. I better fill out a form, right? I better fill out a form, and I have to hand it in to somebody, and then someone says, hey, can we recover it or whatever? And then that's an exception, as opposed to embedding the scrap directly in the quantity per. That would be the other way of doing it. And then it's just poor practice to say I'm planning on making junk.
Right. Well, when you say it that way.
No, you're not planning on making junk. So that's one way. Now there are certain manufacturing processes that they're kind of more like plastic injection molding would be, well, it depends on the type of plastic injection molding, but if there's some processes where for a fact that you actually have to produce more in order to yield what you need for the customer. So that means that I have to start at maybe 1,010 on my work order in order to yield at the end maybe 100.
Oh.
A little different, right? And so it's like it's planned because maybe it's a complicated manufacturing process and things kind of drop off along the way, but you don't want to go back and kind of redo them because it's long setup typically. So in that circumstance, what you'll do is in here, you can put the scrap on the routing process.
Oh.
Not on the material process, but on the routing process.
Okay.
And so what that does is it basically, and it's kind of cool, you can do it at any one of these manufacturing steps. Usually, what I was describing is usually at the very first step of the routing. So it's maybe something that's really complicated that you're building. And so that you can put the scrap percentage at the top level that says, hey, produce more, because stuff is going to fall out throughout the subsequent processes, and you know it, and you don't want to restart. I actually came from a company that did a roto molding. So rotational molding is how we make. You remember the seeing eye dogs? These little coin.
Of course.
That's the kind of thing that they make. And so to mold that, it's a pain. Like it takes 18 hours to set up the machine. And once it's set up, right, it runs 24/7. And so you run this thing. And then they have to clean it up. They have to paint it. There's a whole bunch of other steps that happen afterwards. And those parts go out for subcontracting typically. So what's going to end up happening is, I'm going to have to get off the call here soon, that you want to start the run, make more than what you need because you don't have enough time to reset it up again. Right? Reset up. You want to stop molding, put on another thing, and you don't want to say, oh yeah, I need to make one more. Doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Anyway, today that I have to go on to another call. This has been fun. Hopefully you learned something.
I definitely learned quite a bit today. I super appreciate it. I'm looking forward more to our tech talks and more to learning about manufacturing with you.
Okay. Thanks, Ksenia. Gotta go.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone who has joined us on the line today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be sending out the recording. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Bye for now.